I was standing at the kitchen sink in my robe, washing a coffee mug, when I heard the front door open and close. That small sound used to mean everything. It used to mean someone was coming home. Now, it just meant someone needed something from me. I dried the mug with a dish towel and set it on the drying rack, and I went to the living room to see who it was. It was Dawn, my youngest. She was 39 years old, and she stood in my doorway holding her phone against her chest like a shield. She had on her yoga pants, and her hair was up in that messy bun she always wore when she came over on a weekday. She looked tired. She looked like she had been running around all day. She looked like she was about to ask me to watch her kids again. "Hi, Mom, I'm so sorry. I have a deadline at work, and Caleb's car broke down again, and the boys are with the sitter, and I really need you to cover this week. I can pick them up Saturday morning. I love you." She said it so fast, the way you read a card to get through a line you already memorized. She kissed my cheek and left before I could even say anything. The door closed. The house went quiet. I stood there in the hallway and listened to her footsteps going down the porch steps, and then the engine of her little silver Civic pulling out of the driveway. That was a Tuesday in March. The same month everything started to fall apart. I need to go back. I need to start from the beginning. Because you can't understand the end without knowing what the beginning looked like. I need you to see the house. I need you to see the family. I need you to see what I thought was normal. Because normal is the thing that kills you the slowest. Normal is the thing that wraps its hands around your throat so gently you don't even feel it closing. My name is Ellen. I'm 68 years old. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex off Route 9 in Columbus, Ohio. It's small. The kitchen is narrow, and the bathroom light flickers when you turn it on, and there's a crack in the bedroom ceiling that looks like a river if you stare at it long enough. I moved in here 8 months ago. Before that, I lived in a house on Maple Drive for 43 years, the house I raised my children in, the house my husband and I bought with a first-time buyer loan in 1981 when he was a foreman at the plant, and I was a receptionist at the dentist's office 3 blocks over. That house had 4 bedrooms and a backyard with a fence we painted every summer. White. Always white. He would do the sides, and I would do the front, and we would argue about the shade because I wanted it bright white, and he wanted it off-white, and I always won because I was the one who stood on the ladder holding the brush. That house is gone now. Not physically. Physically, it still stands on Maple Drive with its white fence and its hydrangeas and its new roof. But it's gone. The life in it is gone. The people who lived there are gone. I'm the only one who remembers what it smelled like in the morning when the furnace kicked on. That dusty, warm smell mixed with coffee and toast. I remember every single thing about that house. Every crack in the plaster. Every stain on the carpet. Every scratch my kids made on the door frames when they were little and couldn't reach the handle yet. I remember the kitchen tile my daughter Dawn used to slide across in her socks when she was 7 years old because she thought it was funny, and I thought it was dangerous, and we both laughed anyway. I remember the backyard in August when my son Kevin would hit baseballs off the garage wall until the neighbors complained. I remember my husband Gary sitting on the porch swing reading the paper and humming that same song he always hummed, some old country song I can't remember the name of anymore. He would hum it while he read, and I would hum it while I cooked, and sometimes we would look at each other and laugh because we were humming at the same time without knowing it. That was the sound of my life, humming. Now there's no humming. There's a light that flickers and a crack in the ceiling and the quiet. I need to tell you about Dawn, about Kevin, about Gary, because you need to understand what I gave them. You need to understand what I held together with my bare hands for 30 years and what it cost me and what they did with it when I was done holding it. Dawn was my first child. She came into the world on a rainy Tuesday in October 1985. She weighed 6 pounds, and she screamed so loud the nurse in the next room came in to check. Gary held her, and he cried. That man who never cried about anything in his life. He stood in that hospital room with his new daughter, and his eyes were red, and he said, "I can't believe you're real. I can't believe you're mine." That's the first thing she ever heard. Not that she was beautiful, not that she was perfect, just that she was his, that she was real, that she existed. I carried that memory for 39 years. I carried it while I drove her to school and picked her up. I carried it while I sat in bleachers watching her play volleyball and basketball and softball. I carried it through her prom and her college applications, and the day she walked across that stage at Ohio State with her degree in business, and I was in the third row crying so hard my husband had to hold my arm so I wouldn't fall out of the chair. After college, she moved to Columbus. She got a job in marketing. She met Caleb at a bar on High Street. Caleb was tall and easy, and he had that smile that made you feel like everything was going to be fine. He worked in logistics. He seemed like a good guy. I liked him. Gary liked him. We thought we were lucky. Dawn and Caleb got married in 2015. They bought a house in Westerville. It was small, but it was theirs. Dawn was pregnant within a year. A boy. Then another boy 2 years later. Kevin was born 3 years after that. Caleb worked long hours. Dawn worked too, but not as much because the boys were small and she said she needed to be there. I understood that. I understood it completely. I had done the same thing for them. I had stayed home for 15 years. I had given up the receptionist job when Kevin started kindergarten because Dawn needed someone to watch the boys, and I was right there. I was 20 minutes away. I was always there. So I went. Every single day for 12 years I went. I drove to her house. I let myself in with the key she gave me. I made breakfast. I cleaned up. I did the laundry. I took the boys to the park. I took them to the library. I took them to the pediatrician when they were sick. I held them when they had fevers. I read to them every night. I was their whole world for 12 years. Their grandmother who was always there. The one they ran to when Mom was on the phone.
The one who had the snacks and the patience and the time. I never asked for anything. Not once. I never asked Dawn to pay me. I never asked her to give me any money. I never asked her to do anything for me. I just showed up. Every morning, rain or shine, sick or well, I showed up. Because that's what mothers do. That's what grandmothers do. You give. You give until there's nothing left. And then you give some more. Kevin was my son, my only boy. He was born in 1989. He was different from Dawn. He was quieter. He liked books, and he liked taking things, and he liked sitting on the porch with his dad, listening to baseball games on the radio. He was gentle in a way that people didn't always understand. He didn't like crowds. He didn't like parties. He didn't like the noise that comes with having a big family. But he loved his mom. He would come home from school, and he would sit at the kitchen table, and he would tell me about his day, and I would listen like it was the most important thing anyone had ever said. Gary and I put Kevin through college, Ohio State. Then he got his master's in engineering. We paid for everything. Tuition, books, room and board. We dipped into our savings. We told ourselves it was worth it. It was an investment. He was our son. Of course it was worth it. After college, Kevin got a job in Dayton. He met a woman named Tara. Tara was from Michigan. She was pretty and sharp, and she worked in finance. Kevin was happy. I could see it in his face when he talked about her. That soft look he got when he was talking about someone he loved. I had that look too. I still have it sometimes when I think about Gary, before everything changed. Gary and I celebrated our 43rd anniversary in the spring of 2023. We went to that Italian place on Olentangy River Road that we always went to. We sat in the same booth. He ordered the same thing. I ordered the same thing. The waitress didn't even need to ask. We were regulars. We were that couple, the old couple at the same table every year. Gary held my hand across the table and he said, "You know I'm lucky." I said, "I know." He said, "I don't say it enough." I said, "I know that too." That was the last time I felt safe. I know that now. I didn't know it then. I thought everything was fine. I thought we were just getting older together. I thought the worst thing that could happen was a bad hip or a heart thing. I never thought the worst thing would be the people sitting at my own table. It started with small things. I want to be honest about that. I want you to understand how slow it was, how gradual, how easy it was to miss. In January of 2024, Dawn called me on a Sunday morning. She said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about something. Can you come over?" I said, "Sure, what's wrong?" She said, "Nothing's wrong. I just need to talk." So I went. I drove over. I let myself in with the key. The boys were at the sitter. Caleb was working from home in the back office. Dawn was at the kitchen table with a folder in front of her. She had her reading glasses on. She looked serious. That was the first time I had ever seen her look serious with me. She said, "Mom, I need to talk about the savings." I said, "What about the savings?"
She said, the account, the one at Fifth Third. I said, what about it? She said, we need to talk about how much is in there. I said, why? She said, because I've been managing things. I've been helping. I said, helping with what? She said, just come to the table and I'll show you. She opened the folder.
There were papers, bank statements, account numbers, a list of transactions. Some of them had my name on them. Some of them had hers. I looked at the dates. I looked at the amounts. I didn't understand at first. I thought maybe it was a tax thing. I thought maybe she was helping me with my taxes because I always forgot to do them on time. But then I saw the numbers, the withdrawals, the transfers, the checks that were signed with my name, but the payee was a company I had never heard of. I said, Dawn, what is this? She said, Mom, just let me explain. I said, explain what? Explain why there are 3 checks to a property management company for $15,000 each. Explain why there's a transfer from my savings to your checking account. Explain why there are withdrawals from the IRA that I didn't authorize. She took off her glasses. She put her hand over her eyes. She said, Mom, I know this looks bad. I said, it doesn't look bad. It looks like theft. She said, I wasn't stealing. I said, then what were you doing? She said, I was trying to help. Your house was falling apart. The roof was leaking. The furnace was dying. You needed a new car. I was just trying to fix things before you had to ask. I sat there. I stared at the paper. My hands were shaking, not because I was angry, because I was confused, because the woman sitting across from me was my daughter, the same girl who used to slide across my kitchen floor in her socks, the same girl who cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke up with her, the same girl who called me every Sunday just to talk, the same girl who I drove to every single morning for 12 years. I said, how much? She said, 200,000. I said, what? She said, over the past 3 years. I said, 3 years? She said, yes. I said, 3 years and you never said a word? She said, I was going to tell you, I just needed the right time. I said, there is no right time for this. You don't wait for the right time to steal from your mother. She started crying. She said, Mom, I wasn't stealing. I said, then give it back. She said, I already used most of it. I said, used it on what? She said, the house, your house, the repairs, the roof, the plumbing. I said, I didn't ask you to do that. I said, I would have done it myself. I said, I am capable of handling my own house. She said, I know. I just thought it would be easier this way. I said, easier for who? She didn't answer. I drove home that day and I sat in my car in the driveway and I did not cry. I just sat there, the engine running, the heat on, my hands on the wheel. And I thought about every morning I had driven to her house. Every morning I had let myself in. Every morning I had made breakfast and cleaned and done laundry and taken the boys to the park. I thought about how she must have looked at me every single morning and seen a bank account, a resource, a thing to be used. Not a mother, not a person, a resource. I went home and I looked at our finances. I pulled every statement I could find. I called the bank. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, and I went through every transaction for 3 years. $212,000. That's what was gone. Over $200,000. Some of it went to home repairs I didn't know were happening. Some of it went to her own bills. Some of it went to investments in a company Caleb had started. Some of it just vanished. Small transfers here and there. 1,000 here. 500 there. It added up like water filling a basement. You don't notice it until the floor is underwater. I called Gary that night. He was on the porch because he liked to sit outside in the evening. I could hear the crickets. I said, Gary, we have a problem. He said, what kind of problem? I said, the kind that takes money. There was a long silence. Then he said, how much? I told him. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, I'll be right there. He came inside. He sat at the kitchen table. He looked at the papers. He read the statements. He put them down. He looked at me. He said, Ellen, I had no idea. I said, I know. He said, do you believe her? I said, I don't know what to believe. He said, I believe you. I said, that's not what I asked. He said, I know. He said, I'm sorry. That was the worst. Not the money, the apology. Because an apology means they know. They know what they did. They know it was wrong. And they did it anyway. Gary wanted to confront Dawn. He wanted to call her and tell her it was over. He wanted to cut her out completely. I stopped him. I said, let me think. I said, I need to process this. I said, maybe there's an explanation. He looked at me, and I could see the hurt in his eyes, because he knew.
He knew there was no explanation. He knew what his daughter had done. But he let me have my time, because that's what he always did. He let me have my time. I gave Dawn 2 weeks. I told her I needed to see the receipts. I told her I needed to see every invoice, every contractor, every repair. She brought them to me in a box. I went through them one by one. Some of them were real. The roof, the plumbing, the furnace, those were real repairs. I could see the work. I could see the before and after. Those were legitimate. But the amounts were inflated. Every single one was inflated. The roof cost her $30,000. A roofer told me later that it should have been $12,000. The plumbing was $18,000. It should have been $6,000. She was charging me double, sometimes triple. And then there were the other expenses, the ones I couldn't trace, the ones that went to companies with names I didn't recognize. Those were the ones that kept me up at night. I called a lawyer. His name was Martin. He was a family law attorney in Hilliard. I sat in his office and I put the folder on his desk and said, "This is my daughter." He looked at the numbers. He looked at me. He said, "Ellen, this is going to be a long process." I said, "I know." He said, "She'll fight it." I said, "I know that too." He said, "Are you prepared for that?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "You need to be." The case took 14 months. 14 months of depositions. 14 months of my daughter sitting across from me in a conference room and telling a court that she did nothing wrong. 14 months of her lawyer trying to say that I was mentally incompetent, that I didn't understand my own finances, that she was just helping, that she was the responsible one, that I was confused and old and didn't know what was happening. Caleb didn't say much. He sat in the back of the courtroom and he stared at his hands. I think he knew. I think he knew from the beginning. But he didn't stop it. He let it happen. That was almost worse than if he had done it himself. The judge ruled in my favor. She said Dawn had to return the money. All of it. Every dollar. She had 6 months to pay it back. But by then Dawn had already spent a lot of it. She had paid off credit cards.
She had put a down payment on a bigger house in New Albany. She had put money into a college fund for the boys. She had bought a new car, a Subaru Outback. The money was gone. It was in houses and cars and credit cards, and there was nothing left to give back. The judge ordered a repayment plan, monthly payments over 5 years. Dawn agreed to it. She was supposed to start in June of 2024. She missed the first 3 payments. Then she paid 2, then she missed 4. Then she paid 1. Then she stopped answering my calls. Kevin found out about the lawsuit during Thanksgiving. Tara told him. He called me from Dayton on a Wednesday night. He said, "Mom, I heard about the court thing." I said, "Kevin, I'm okay." He said, "Are you?" I said, "I'm fine." He said, "Mom, I don't know what to say." I said, "You don't have to say anything." He said, "I feel like I should have known." I said, "You didn't know." He said, "I feel like I should have." He said, "I drove to Westerville once and Caleb was on the phone in the driveway and I heard him say, 'We're going to be fine after she's gone.'" He said it so matter-of-fact, like he was talking about the weather. Kevin said I stood in the driveway and I didn't say anything. I just got in my car and I drove home. I said, "Kevin, you should have said something." He said, "I know." I said, "Why didn't you?" He said, "Because I didn't want to believe it." He said, "I wanted to think it was nothing." He said, "I wanted to think my brother-in-law was just talking." He said, "I'm sorry, Mom." I said, "Don't be sorry, be angry." He said, "I am." He said, "I just don't show it." I said, "I know you don't." I said, "You're your father's boy." He laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in weeks. It hurt so good to hear it. Gary and I didn't talk about it. Not really. We lived in the same house and we sat at the same table and we went to bed at the same time, but we didn't talk about it. He would sit on the porch and I would sit inside, and we would exist in the same space without touching each other. One night in December, he came into the bedroom and he sat on the edge of the bed and he said, "I keep thinking about when she was little." I said, "Me too." He said, "I used to carry her on my shoulders at the 4th of July parade." I said, "I remember." He said she would grab the flags. He said she would try to eat the candy from the vendors. I said, "I remember." I think I loved her more than I should have. I said, "Gary, don't say that." He said, "I'm just saying." I said, "Don't say it." He said, "Okay." He died in April. Heart attack. He was 71. He was sitting on the porch reading the paper and humming that old country song, and his hand dropped, and that was it. The paramedics said he didn't suffer. They said it was quick. I don't know if I believe that. I think about that porch. I think about that song. I think about how he never got to say the things he needed to say. Not about Dawn. Not about the money. Not about how he felt about the whole thing. He just stopped.
right in the middle of his humming. I moved out of the house 2 months later. I couldn't stay. Every room had a memory. Every corner had a ghost. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sit at that kitchen table without seeing Don's face. So I packed what I could into boxes and I drove to this apartment complex, and I signed a lease, and I sat on the bed in the empty bedroom and I did not cry. I just sat there, the way I sat in my car that day, the way I have been sitting ever since. Dawn still owes me money.
She owes me over $200,000. The repayment plan is still technically in place. Her lawyer says she's having financial difficulties. Caleb still works in logistics. Dawn still works in marketing. They still live in their house in New Albany. The boys are 9 and 7. They don't know what happened. I hope they never find out. I hope they grow up and they don't know that their grandmother was taken away by their mother. I hope they remember me as the woman who made pancakes and read them stories and took them to the park. Kevin calls me every Sunday. He always has. He drives down from Dayton once a month. He brings me groceries. He fixes the things I can't fix. He sits with me in the quiet and he doesn't try to fill it. He just sits. That's enough. That's more than enough. Tara sent me a card last Christmas. It said sorry. It said we love you. It said Kevin talks about you all the time. I put it on the refrigerator. I look at it every morning when I make my coffee. It's the only card on that refrigerator. The rest of the magnets are old. A couple from the boys. A photo of the grandkids that Dawn took at the zoo last summer. I can't take it down. I can't throw it away. It's the only proof that someone in that family still thinks I'm a person. I go to the coffee shop on Saturday mornings, the one on Sawmill Road with the wobbly table by the window. I sit there for 2 hours. I drink my coffee. I look out the window. I watch people walk by with their dogs and their kids and their shopping bags. I don't envy them. I just watch. Because it's better than sitting in the apartment listening to the refrigerator hum. Sometimes I drive past the house on Maple Drive. I don't stop. I just drive by. The fence is still white. The hydrangeas are still there. The garage still has the dent from Kevin's baseball. The porch still has the swing. I wonder if Dawn ever looks at it. I wonder if she ever drives past it and thinks about the woman who stood on that ladder and painted that fence every summer for 40 years. I wonder if she ever thinks about the coffee mug I washed every morning, the one she used to slide across the kitchen floor in her socks. I wonder if she ever hums that old song. I don't anymore. I can't remember the words.